Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the ordinary meeting of Council for the 8th of December 2020, which I now declare open. Although it is not possible for members of the public to join us in person tonight, our meetings remain open to the public via the live stream on our website. And I extend a warm welcome to all those of you who are watching this meeting of our new council term. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which Moonee Valley is located, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay respects to their spirits, ancestors, community members and elders past, present and emerging. We also extend this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Apologies and leave of absence. Councillors, I have not received any apologies for tonight's meeting. Item 4, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes from the council meetings held on Tuesday the 17th of September 2020 and Tuesday the 24th of November 2020 be moved?
Happy to move.
Moved Councillor Sypek, and I have a seconder, seconded by Councillor Byrne. Councillor Sypek, any discussion? Councillor Byrne? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item number 5, declarations of conflicts of interest. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest in any item on the agenda this evening? Councillor Bedio? Microphone, Councillor Bedio.
I declare a conflict of interest on item 10.2. I would like to declare a general conflict of interest due to a perception that this matter may cause a conflict with my business interests.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Does any other councillor have a conflict of interest they wish to declare? Councillor Sypek?
I have a declaration.
Please do.
I'd just like to declare that I've been appointed as a director on the Holloway Aged Care Facility in East Keilor.
Congratulations, Councillor Sypek. That's great to hear. Any other conflicts of interest, councillors? If not, we'll move to item 6, presentations. And I'd like to start by acknowledging our new councillor team for the coming 4 years. Councillor Ava Adams, Buckley Ward. Councillor Jacob Bedio, Moonong Ward. Councillor Samantha Byrne, Rosehill Ward. Councillor Katrina Hodgson, Moonong Ward. Councillor Rose Isa, Moonong Ward. Councillor Narelle Sharp, Buckley Ward. Councillor John Sypek, Rosehill Ward, and Councillor Pierce Tyson, Rosehill Ward. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the 5 outgoing councillors who served during the previous term of council, being Councillor Jim Cusack, 15 years service, Councillor Andrea Serace, 8 years service, Councillor Nicole Marshall, 8 years service, Councillor Rebecca Gauci-Marici, 4 years service, and Councillor Richard Lawrence, 4 years service. I would also like to formally welcome our new Chief Executive Officer, Helen Swee, who joins us in chambers tonight for the first time. Today, Moonee Valley City Council would also like to acknowledge the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence campaign, a United Nations initiative to end violence against women. For those who may not know, each year around the world, people act to eliminate gender-based violence during the 16 Days of Activism, which is held from the 25th of November to the 10th of December. Gender inequality has been identified as a key driver of family violence and violence against women, with more equitable societies presenting fewer instances of violence. We know family violence is an issue in Moonee Valley, as it is in neighbourhoods and regions throughout Australia. At the time of writing this, so far this year, 50 Australian women have been murdered in Australia by their current or former partner. That is a horrifying statistic. The World Health Organization has named violence against women a global health problem of epidemic proportions. As part of the 16 Days of Activism, we are working to encourage our community to embrace gender equality as a part of our Fair Action Plan. You can read more about the Fair Action Plan on our website and find out more about 16 Days of Activism 2020 through Respect Victoria. Moonee Valley City Council have hosted a suite of events to acknowledge the 16 Days of Activism, including the upcoming free yoga and meditation session and Acts of Kindness, How to Be an Ally workshop on Thursday the 10th of December. Please visit our Facebook page to learn more about these events. I would also like to acknowledge my fellow councillors and staff in the building who are wearing orange tonight in support of this important cause. Moonee Valley City Council would also like to note that last week we celebrated the International Day of People with a Disability. This day is a United Nations sanctioned day and is aimed at increasing understanding and awareness of people with a disability. It is also aimed at highlighting the significant contributions they make to our community. To celebrate in 2020, Council produced The COVID Chronicles, a short film which shares the stories of 6 of our residents with a disability. These stories highlight their resilience and ability to make positive contributions to their community throughout the pandemic. This short film is now available on our social media channels, and I strongly encourage our community to jump online and gain a greater understanding and appreciation of the challenges members of our community with a disability feature or experience on a daily basis. Councillors, are there any other presentations to Council this evening? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to present to the City an Essendon High School book. Mayor, you were able to attend the Year 12 valedictory service, I'm just trying to think, last week or earlier this week? Whatever it was. The dates kind of blur in COVID. And being a former student, I did a video presentation for them, which was really exciting to be a part of. So this highlights 100 years between 1913 and 2013, and it's quite a lovely book that has various reflections from past students and teachers. So it's obviously been gifted to the City of Moonee Valley, so we'll pass that on for our collection.
Thank you very much, Councillor Byrne. Do we have any other presentations from councillors this evening? If not, we move to item 7, petitions and joint letters. Councillors, do we have any petitions or joint letters being tabled this evening? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move to note that a further 461 signatures have been received on a change.org petition that was tabled at the council meeting on the 11th of February 2020 regarding the sale of land at 45 Valley Lake Boulevard in Keilor East, and that officers have prepared a response to this petition.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Seconder to receive the petition, Councillor Tyson. Councillor Byrne, do you want to speak to the receipt of this petition?
No, that's fine. Just briefly, just that there was a significant amount of approximately 450 that were already submitted through early last year, and then when sales signs went up, then the petition kind of continued even though it had already been submitted. So suppose this is just the second half of the petition that has already been submitted to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Tyson?
Nothing much to add except that's a long ongoing issue, and hopefully will be resolved.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the receipt of the petition? Otherwise, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. We now come to item 8, public question time, and we have received questions from 7 members of the community for tonight's meeting. As we do not have residents in the public gallery tonight, I propose that we move to suspend the provisions in our governance rules, which requires questioners to be present in the gallery. That will enable me to read the questions that have been submitted in advance and for the CEO to read the responses. So, councillors, may I please have a mover that Council resolves to suspend the public question provisions in its governance rules to allow questions from the gallery to be read by the Mayor and responses read out by the CEO for this meeting. Moved Councillor Byrne, seconded Councillor Bettio. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. So we will now move to reading the questions. Again, we are reading these questions verbatim. They are the words of the individual or individuals asking the question. So question 1 is from Joel Blake. Joel asks, the council report states the proposal is not expected to result in any on-street parking pressures, which is factually incorrect. I believe this is in reference to Langs Road, although it's not set out in the question here. The mechanic business, of which most of the supporters listed are long-time customers, regularly has 6 or more vehicles on site and multiple flow-over vehicles parked in nearby Elliott Street. The flow-over of vehicles will escalate, with a petrol station limiting the on-site car access even further. Last week, Moonee Valley City Council imposed further parking restrictions to Elliott Street, now at 50% capacity, and Chevelle Street has 0% capacity due to a busy bus route. I now cannot park in front of my own house. This has created a serious welfare issue for my family and local residents, particularly at night, and is discriminatory against residents living in the top left end of Elliott Street. Where does the council suggest we park safely when there is no parking space in Elliott Street? And how will delivery services, guests and emergency vehicles park when required? I'll now pass to the CEO to respond to Joel Blake's question.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the Mayor, on-street car parking is available to all at any time unless restrictions apply. Elliott Street is limited by parking during the showground events. Chevelle Street parking restrictions have been imposed to improve the movement of the bus route. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Question 2 is also from Joel Blake and also refers to 48 Langs Road. Joel asks, the council report under 3.1 states high traffic volumes exist, yet a response in table 5 states the location of the petrol station is not in a main thoroughfare. This is one of many contradictory statements in the report. Establishing a new petrol station on possibly the smallest land in Melbourne does not align to a future renewables focus, with keeping to heritage standards and fairness to local residents for parking, traffic flow and environment. Therefore, how can the council report conclude the proposal is in line with MV 2040 and a 20-minute neighbourhood when key themes of green, beautiful and fair are not met and clearly inadequate? Again, I will pass to the CEO to respond to Joel Blake's question.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the Mayor, the report does not contradict itself. The 2 references made are not relating to the same matters. It's acknowledged that Langs Road is a Category 1 road zone and managed by Department of Transport as a major thoroughfare. However, Chevelle Street referenced in Table 5 is not a thoroughfare or identified as a major road. The proposed development is consistent with MV 2040 as it will contribute to the economic growth of Ascot with its local neighbourhood in accordance with Clause 02.01-2, 20 minutes neighbourhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Our next 3 questions are in relation to report 10.3, being 45 to 69 Woodlands Street, Essendon. The first question comes from Michael Whelan, and Michael asks, Section 3.5 of the council report states that it is acceptable to demolish the office building to meet the conditions of clause 63.10. To arrive at this decision, it appears that council only considered case law from 2003, Simons Gilbert v Stonington City Council, VCAT 741, 24th of June 2003. In my objection to this planning application, I referred to 2 other more recent case law that are contrary to the above-mentioned case law. These cases are Kremer Group versus Burundara City Council, 2008, VCAT 1015, and KK Corporation v Melbourne City Council, 2009, VCAT 2757. How did council assess and consider the more recent case law in its decision-making, and would this case law change the assessment regarding to demolition of the office building? I will again pass to the CEO to answer Michael Whelan's question.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the Mayor, officers have considered various VCAT case law when considering the matter of existing use rights associated with this application. Fundamentally, officers have assessed the application against Clause 6310 of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme and considers that the site benefits from existing use rights. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next question is from Peter Shields, and Peter Shields asks, the council report says that the covenant is not breached by the proposal. A copy of a letter from a member of the Supreme Court's property list practitioner group had been submitted that suggested a building scheme could apply to most of the lots in LP 8229, including Lot 3. That raised a significant question in regards to as to whether the restriction which applies to the land in the form of a predominantly single dwelling restriction may be constructed as not merely acting to limit the number of dwellings which may be constructed on the land, but whether it also operates so as to limit the manner of its use more broadly. It suggested that a more detailed and considered review of the relevant restrictions would be required before it could be confidently decided that Covenant 998376 and the building scheme have no work to do in determining how Lot 3 may be developed. I can find nothing in the report addressing the building scheme question. Can I please have a detailed explanation? Did Council obtain better and further information from a party independent of the applicant? And if so, by who? And what was the advice? I again pass to the CEO to answer Peter Shields' question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the Mayor, Council officers have conducted their own independent analysis of the certificate of title and have come to the conclusion that the application is not in breach of the Covenant 0998376 or 010-67391. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next question is from Joseph Cooper Nolan. Joseph asks, it is my understanding that although Heritage Victoria has rejected this development, the Council will be considering this application at the ordinary meeting to be held on Tuesday the 8th of December 2020, and given the revelations from IBAC's investigation into the Casey Council, Operation Sandon, it is obvious that all conflicts of interest need to be declared in planning matters that come before the Council and their planning department to ensure that the process is open and transparent. Therefore, I am asking each councillor and the Mayor to advise if they or any of their staff or members of the Council have any conflict of interest that they could reasonably be expected to declare in regards to this development. For example, 1, do any of the councillors, Mayor and or council staff and members of their immediate families have a business or personal relationship with the developer's staff, and or their business associates, and or the Columbans Mission Centre? Question 2, or point 2, has the developer donated any money to any of the councillors, Mayor, council staff, and or any political party that any councillor, the Mayor, and or the council staff have an affiliation with? 3, has the developer taken any of the councillors, the Mayor, or council staff members to lunch and or given them any gifts and or offered any incentives if they were to support the proposed development? I'll pass to the CEO to answer Joseph Cooper Nolan's question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the Mayor, under the Local Government Act 2020, a councillor is responsible for disclosing any conflict of interest they might have in relation to a question before Council, and excluding themselves from decision-making in relation to that matter. This includes any discussion or vote on the matter at any Council meeting. All councillor conflict of interest disclosures are recorded in Council's publicly available meeting minutes. In addition, Council maintains a register of all conflict of interest declared by councillors on Council's website. We also maintain a public register of declared gifts and hospitality received by councillors, which you can also find on Council's website. Under Council's governance rules, Council staff are likewise required to disclose any conflict of interest within the report to Council. In the case of this report, you will find the staff conflict of interest disclosure at page 60 of tonight's agenda, where it states that no Council officer involved in the preparation of the report has a conflict to declare. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next 4 questions for tonight are in relation to Report 10.4, 12 Station Avenue, Ascot Vale. The first 2 are from Jennifer Hallam. Jennifer Hallam asks, if the proposed development for a demolition of existing building plus additional 4 residences is approved at 12 Station Ave, what plans does the council have to accommodate for additional rubbish bins and minimise disruption in Station Ave on rubbish collection day and the night prior? It is already a mess without an additional 6 rubbish bins. Resident car parking is really compromised, as is pedestrian access to the station. Also, pedestrian safety is a key issue to consider. Once bins have been emptied, they often lie on the footpath or on the road until they are collected. Realistically, this can be at the end of the working day. I'll pass to the CEO to answer Jennifer Hallam's question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the Mayor, Council's Waste Management Department has reviewed the proposal and has deemed that curbside collection is acceptable, as an additional 6 bins does not add significant amenity or collection issues to the current arrangement. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The second question from Jennifer Hallam asks, if the proposed development is approved, will the future residents in the development be provided with a visitor's permit or be able to purchase a visitor's permit? Parking is already a nightmare in the street. Residents often need to park their cars at the station car park and walk back home alone at night, an issue of safety for residents. Again, I'll pass to the CEO to answer Jennifer Hallam's question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the Mayor, Council will not be providing any on-street parking permits to any future occupier of the land. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next 2 questions tonight are from Anne Langash. Anne's first question, with the Neighbourhood Character Overlay 3, which covers the site, stating that neighbourhood character is due to the intactness of shopfront terraces and original dwellings, do councillors support the destruction of an intact original dwelling on the site? I will again refer to the CEO to answer Anne Langash's question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the Mayor, in this instance, where there are planning scheme permissions required for the removal of a dwelling, consideration needs to be undertaken as to the significance of the dwelling to be removed, as well as the building that is going to be constructed in its place. This forms part of Council's decision on the application. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Anne Langush's second question. Given that the infill housing under this neighbourhood character overlay is supposed to enhance the streetscape, do councillors consider that the proposed development meets this requirement? I'm going to refer to the CEO to answer Anne Langush's question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the Mayor, the development requires an assessment against the provisions of the Moody Valley Planning Scheme, including the overlay controls to determine the appropriateness of the build form outcome. This assessment will then allow for the formulation as to what Council's decision on the application will be. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Our final question for the evening comes from Louise Teresh, who asks, can our council's planning department have a new regulation put into place that ensures a covenant lawyer attend a VCAT hearing when a matter of covenant law applies or is in question, as opposed or alongside to a town planner? Pending this, is there or can there be a rule that ensures council's planning department fully informs residents as to who they have chosen to send to represent council/us, so that residents have an opportunity to discuss key points with representatives well prior to court hearings at VCAT? I'll again refer to the CEO to answer Louise Teresh's question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the Mayor, Council determines the required representation for all VCAT hearings and matters as the nature of the matter entails, including 29 Woodlands Street, Essendon. Council does not need to formally advise the general public, including objectors, on such matters such as representation. However, Council's statutory planning unit is available on phone or email to discuss such inquiries as they have done so in the example outlined. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO, and that concludes our public question time. Item 9, reports from delegated committees. Councillors, do we have any reports from delegated committees? If no, we now move to item 10, reports. Item 10.1 is 48 Langs Road, Ascot Vale, Lot 1 on registered plan of strata subdivision 033185W, use and development of a service station along with alteration of access to a road zone category 1 within a heritage overlay area. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa?
I'd like to move a motion to refuse. Mayor, would you like me to read that?
Yes, please.
I'd like to move the motion that Council issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit in relation to planning permit application number MV/632/2019 for the use and development of a service station along with alterations of access to a road zone category 1 within a heritage overlay at 48 Langs Road, Ascot Vale, Lot 1 on registered plan of strata subdivision 033185W, close bracket, in accordance with the following grounds of refusal. 1. The use and development would cause adverse traffic and amenity impacts on the surrounding properties and fails to meet clause 02.03/7 bracket transport close bracket of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. 2. The use and development will cause adverse off-site amenity impacts by compromising human health and safety and fails to comply with clause 13.07/1S land use compatibility of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. Point 3, the use and development fails to meet clause 2.03/3 environmental risks and amenity and clause 13.07/1L discretionary uses in residential zones of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme by presenting an inappropriate use adjoining residential properties which will impact on the amenity of the local area, having regard to the hours of operation, noise, use of aged steel tanks or odour emissions. 4. The use of the site fails to meet clause 52.0610 car parking decision guidelines of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme by causing queuing in a residential street and disrupting traffic flow. And lastly, point 5, the use and development are inconsistent with the vision and strategic direction of MV 2040 of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme as it is at odds with enabling a green and fair city.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillors, do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. So this application does have quite a complicated history, and it's we've done our best, I think, in the short time that we've been on council to try to work through the very many complexities for this application. I think most critically with respect to its history, in 2017 VCAT ordered that no existing use rights could be proven for this site as a service station and operations as a petrol station were required to cease. And that means really that tonight we have to treat this permit application very much afresh. And the question that faces us is whether our planning policy supports a petrol station on this site, regardless of what has been there to date. So when we turn to this question, certainly within section 32 of our planning scheme, there is, our planning scheme supports a limited range of non-residential uses to serve local community needs. Mayor, can I just pause for one moment because I don't think I have a timer clock going.
No, we just wrecked it, so that's why I'm very quickly on the text here to get...
Thank you. I apologise if I go...
And that's not correct either.
I can't promise to wrap up in 5 seconds. I'll just keep talking perhaps.
I've got my own, so...
Thanks. Please. If I go over, please excuse me. I'll try to be brief. So certainly a service station is allowed under Section 2 use provided it adjoins a road zone, and Langs Road is a road zone. It also has to be less than 3,000 square metres, and we know that one of the peculiarities of this site is that it's actually quite small. However, we also, in looking at whether this discretionary use is appropriate for this site, we do have to turn to clause 1307, 1L and 1S. And they're the sections that I referred to in the refusal that I've just moved, which set out objectives and guidelines for discretionary use in residential zones. And 1S talks about land use compatibility, and it talks about protecting community amenity, human health and safety, while facilitating appropriate commercial and other uses. And it talks about potential adverse off-site impacts, which we are asked to avoid in permitting discretionary uses in near residential zones. Now, my view is that this particular proposal does not sufficiently guarantee against these adverse off-site impacts. Not necessarily just by being a petrol station, but the site is very small. It's very closely, it adjoins another unit, the subdivided unit on its strata title. It adjoins a residence there, and it adjoins another residence to the east. In addition, we have seen some EPA advice that was sent on the 4th of December, so just a few days ago, that did alert us to the separation distance. And I'll just read from that advice here. Council should consider whether the separation distance proposed is adequate to protect the health and wellbeing and amenity of the neighbouring residents. If we turn to clause 1307(1)L, which also gives us some guidance around this discretionary use in a residential zone, this particular policy talks about discouraging 24-hour convenience stores or petrol stations in residential zones, and also considering as relevant the hours of operation, noise or odour emissions, traffic and car parking, and the way in which all these factors might impact the amenity of existing residential uses. And again, it's my view, and we've seen from some of the questions that we've had tonight, that obviously the view of some of the residents in their experience living in the area, that the traffic, the car parking and potentially the odour emissions from the petrol station will also have an impact on the amenity, on their residential amenity. We also have to consider under clause 2.033 the environmental risks and the impact on amenity. And the greatest risk here, in my view, is from the retention of the old tanks that have... So while it has no existing use rights as a petrol station, there are steel tanks on site that will be retained. And I don't feel sufficiently satisfied that those don't pose a risk, an ongoing risk in terms of the leakage. We know from the EPA's advice that being comprised of steel, they will fail at some point, and it will lead to leaks that may not be detected for some time before doing damage. Now, petrol stations are not... Obviously, they're not residential homes, which is why all these additional protections need to be in place. And in my view, we need to, as a council, have a very high threshold and a high bar for what we consider to be an appropriate petrol station usage within a residential zone on a small site. And we've... in my view, the applicant has not come close to satisfying a reasonable threshold for ensuring the environmental safety and amenity of neighbouring properties. We've seen some VCAT cases decided in VCAT recently that do put a high threshold for service stations on a number of details, and I think that warrants council taking a very cautious approach to this particular application and not issuing a permit without being fully satisfied that the applicant has met a very high bar for operation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Isa, for a very thorough interrogation of the application, which I think in this case is warranted. Personally, I think...
Hodgson, sorry, I think your microphone just needs to...
Just a little
Yes.
bit... Okay, great. Sorry, everyone. Personally, I think the intended use as a petrol station in the general residential zone will have a significant impact on neighbourhood amenity to the detriment of surrounding residents, which Councillor Isa's already referred to. I think there are significant concerns around the safety of the existing infrastructure, which has the potential to cause a hazardous situation. There are traffic and noise impacts to consider, and the application overall, I don't think meets the council's vision for a healthy and green and a healthy and fair green city. I don't think there's a net benefit to the community through the granting of the permit. I don't consider that the commercial gain and local employment is balanced with the negative impacts of this to community amenity, health and safety. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Bedio.
I just want to foreshadow to my colleagues that I have an alternative motion to grant the permit with additional conditions. I guess in response to Councillor Isa's motion, I think if you were to drive past this site, you would very much see it as a petrol station that has been closed down. I think the site very clearly is a petrol station. There is just some administration, I guess, or some legitimacy in terms of the expired use, but I think it very clearly is a petrol station, and hence why, and I can set out in the proposed motion that I encourage the councillors to support the alternative.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? I have determined that was dissent or opposition, so Councillor Isa, you can have a right of reply for 2 minutes if you would like.
Just to speak very briefly to the point raised by Councillor Bettio, it certainly has petrol bowsers and a mechanic has operated at some stage on the site. In 2017, there was an application for existing use rights on the site, which means that there would have had to have been use on the site within the last 15 years. There could have been a break for 2 years within that time frame, but the existing use rights would have been granted had there been use on the site over that 15 years. So we know that was not granted. VCAT ordered there to be any any sale of petrol to cease immediately, and so we know from that it hasn't been used as a petrol station under the law for the past 15 years. So while there's some old bowsers there and some very old steel tanks, we can't see it as a petrol station. This permit is asking us to apply our policy afresh and see whether we would allow a petrol station today in 2020 to be built on this site, regardless of what might have been there in the past, the distant past. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? It is Councillor Isa, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Byrne. All those against? Sorry, to say that your hand was up for support, and that's Councillor Adams. All those against? Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Bedio. That motion is lost. Councillor Bedio, you have foreshadowed a motion. If you wish to present that now, please.
Yes, I propose to support the officer's recommendation with some following changes to the endorsed conditions. That being 1C, that a minimum headroom clearance for a 8.8 metre long fuel tank where access is required throughout the site. A notation stating all vehicle movements to be in accordance with Australian standard B99 for patron vehicles, so essentially ensuring that they are not commercial vehicles, not trucks using the site. The provision of signage indicating patron vehicles to be of a standard vehicle type. And and also an alteration to condition 9 that the fuel station ceases operation at 9 p.m. as opposed to the proposed hours of 10 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak to your motion?
In following with what I had said previously, whilst Councillor Isa was correct that the site had not been in use for a number of years, as part of the VCAT order, VCAT stated that if the applicant would like to use the site for a petrol station, that they should seek a planning permit for the use and development, which they have done. Also note that the application was submitted to council last year and it has been with us for quite a while. Irrespective of the election period and the coming of new councillors, we can't hold it against the applicant that we have not been exposed to the application as we knew. I don't think that's their problem. While I agree that a petrol station would not be suitable if it was in the middle of Cheval Street, the reality is the petrol station is abutting, and the layout for the petrol station is abutting Langs Road, and Langs Road is a Category 1 road zone, directly adjacent to the showgrounds, which is a major recreational precinct. I don't see it as being, I don't see the application as being unreasonable by any stretch. Whilst there are environmental concerns, I believe the officers have addressed those concerns quite clearly and has remedied those concerns. The EPA's recommendations on how we can ensure the site remains safe from an environmental perspective has been included as part of the officers' recommendations of the endorsed conditions. And for that reason, I see no reason why I would refuse the permit.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to the motion? Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I will put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Bedio. All those against? Councillor Isa, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Adams. That motion is carried. Before we move to item 10.2, Councillor Bedio has declared a conflict of interest, so we'll leave the chambers under our meeting procedures. So item 10.2 is 386 and 392 to 398 Racecourse Road, Flemington, Lot 1 PS 334464S and Lot 1 TP 553631P. Use of the land as a hotel in a general residential zone, construction of a multi-storey building including alterations and additions to the existing hotel, Newmarket Tavern, with an extended area for the sale and consumption of liquor, a reduction in car parking requirement, and the creation and alteration of access to a road in a road zone Category 1. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa?
Mayor, I'd like to move an alternative motion, please.
Yes, please, Councillor Isa.
The motion is that Council, with respect to an application for review of conditions on permit, resolves to advise the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, VCAT, and other parties to the application that it generally accepts the without prejudice consent position contained in attachment 6 separately circulated, and that a modified planning permit be granted subject to the following modified conditions. 31, the extended hotel use authorised by this permit, including the sale and consumption of liquor, may only operate between the hours of A, rooftop bar area enclosed Monday to Sunday 7 a.m. to 11 p.m, with rooftop to be closed from 10 p.m. onwards, background music when roof open, low moderate level amplified music when roof closed. B, rooftop bar northeast and northern, Monday to Sunday 7 a.m. to 10 p.m, to 11 p.m. if roof can be fully closed, background music only. C, rooftop bar south, Monday to Sunday, 7am to 11pm, background music when roof open. Low, moderate level amplified music when roof closed. D, ground floor dining lounge, Monday to Sunday, 7am to 1am the following day, background music only between Monday to Friday, 9am to 10pm, Saturday, 10am to 10pm, and Sunday, 12 noon to 9pm. E, ground floor courtyard, Monday to Sunday, 9am to 9pm, no music. F, all other internal areas, Monday to Sunday, 7am to 1am the following day, and all other external areas, Monday to Sunday, 7am to 11pm, no music. 32, the operating hours for the ground floor outdoor courtyard area to the north and west of the site, including the sale and consumption of liquor within this area, must not occur before 9am or after 9pm on any day.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. I'll seek a seconder for that motion. Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, while the motion sounds really complicated, and I apologise for you having to hear my voice so much, it's because the conditions are quite complicated, and there actually are not as many changes in what I've read from the mediated offer as it might sound. So the key changes are that the applicant has offered to have the rooftop bar, or has asked rather, to have the rooftop bar open until 1am. Previously, the council decision was to close that, I think, at 9pm. So the concession we're making here is to meet midway at 11pm. And the reason that I am moving for the 11pm is a step up from the 9pm, down from the 1am, is that our policy for this particular type of application, and it's 13071L licensed premises, the policy guideline is that we should limit the hours of operation and use of outdoor areas to 11pm if the licensed premises is adjacent to a residential zone. Now, this premises is not only adjacent to a residential zone, it's adjacent to an aged care home. And the aged care home has been there for quite some time. It may not always be there, but it is there right now. And I think it's reasonable to expect that if someone wishes to open a rooftop bar right next door to an aged care home, that they do consider the residents of that aged care home and comply with the policy of an outdoor area closing at 11pm. Now, I understand that the applicant may argue that there is some of the rooftop bar has some louvered roofing, and some of it potentially can be enclosed. However, I'm finding that the plans are a little bit vague on how enclosed and how acoustically protective that environment is. And when we have a rooftop bar without any acoustic protection around that, with the applicant was asking to then be able to play moderately amplified music up until 1am on a rooftop bar. And I think that is asking too much of the residential neighbours, not just in the aged care home, but those directly to the north and to the west of this site. That's probably the major change. The other rooftop areas in this particular in my modified proposal, the only change that I'm suggesting there is that if the roof can't be fully closed, to close those at 10pm. If the roof can be closed, to bring it out to 11pm. The applicant's offer was to close it at 11pm. So again, the conditions I'm proposing are just putting a little bit of a caveat there in case the roof can't be fully closed, because the application talks about louvered closing, and it also talks about music levels when it's open and closed. So they're obviously, given that there are different levels put for music being roof open and roof closed, there is the capacity for the roof to be open. So as a safeguard, I'm asking here that if the roof is open, that it be that there be protection at 10 p.m. It can extend till 11 p.m. if that roof is sufficiently closable. I don't think that's quite the word, but I think you know what I mean. The only other change that I'm suggesting is just to keep the music rather than being moderate to high level amplified music on the rooftop northern louvered roof bar, to keep that at moderate level, or low to moderate level, which means it can be at moderate level, so rather than it being at high level. And apart from that, the conditions are all, I think, are all the same as the proposal. So all internal areas to 1 a.m. as requested. Again, that's a step up from what council had decided last July. So there, in this proposal, there are some considerable concessions to try to meet the applicant halfway, and it really is around the rooftop bar and those northern rooftop areas where I'm asking for an 11 p.m. rather than 1 a.m. Closure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to this motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Just in addition to what Councillor Isa's outlined, one of the other original conditions put by the previous council was for the ground floor courtyard to close at 5 p.m, and this proposed motion meets the applicant's proposed alternative of 9 p.m. without any change to that. So again, another significant concession there in this motion. As Councillor Isers mentioned, of significant concern in this matter is the amenity of neighbouring residents in the general residential zone, in particular the next door neighbouring aged care facility. And what I would want to do is to support a few slight amendments to the applicant's offer to ensure that the intentions of the former decision made by council are, honoured. That being reduced operating hours from those two areas likely to pose the greatest impact on neighbouring amenity.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just say something quickly. I completely understand all the alternatives put up tonight. And understand the rationale behind them. I guess my only concern is that this has already gone to mediation, and obviously none of us were privy to that mediation, and just from my past experiences I can be pretty loath to sort of involving myself personally in something that has been agreed to between parties at a VCAT meeting that I personally wasn't a part of. So I'm just flagging that I may not be able to support this as it is, only for those reasons only. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? I will determine there was opposition, so Councillor Isa, I'll allow you a right of reply.
So just to clarify, this didn't actually go to a compulsory conference. Otherwise, I think we would be in. We would have to hold this confidentially at this particular hearing. So, Councillor Sharp, it didn't actually go to the type of mediation that I've been part of many of those, where it's that confidential, sitting down across the table, trying to come at an agreement. That's not what's taken place here. My understanding is that in order to avoid VCAT delay, the applicant has put a particular offer on the table. And I know it's hard to convey that the hours that I've spent trying to match council's, the original application, the recommended, the council's decision, and then this particular proposal, to try to work through all of the different elements of the different components of the application. I've worked really hard to try to come up with a proposal that I think does make significant concessions. That courtyard area is right against the aged care home. Council previously decided to close that at 5 p.m, and we're offering here to keep it till 9 p.m. Other areas were Council previously decided to close at 9 p.m. We're pushing that out till 11 p.m. And keeping everything indoors until 1 a.m. So significant concessions from Council's previous position. And look, it may well be that the applicant doesn't like this particular offer, but it hasn't been an offer that's been through that mediated give and take process. I guess I'm trying to work as hard as I can to put something on the table that I think is a fair compromise, and I'd really ask colleagues for your support in trying to meet that balance.
Can I please ask for a point of clarification,
Yes,
Mayor?
you can, Councillor Sharp.
Noting what Councillor Isa has just mentioned, maybe I have read this report incorrectly, but it talks about the VCAT application for review being scheduled for next year. So is there mediation? If we haven't already been to mediation, can you please have it confirmed whether there is mediation?
Yes, I can. I'll refer that through the CEO, who may want to call on the Manager of Statutory Planning, who can speak from the lectern if required.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will ask the Acting Group Manager Planning respond to this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. It's correct that there is no mediation in this process. There we go. Thank you. There isn't a mediation process which has been set for this particular hearing. If Council agrees with what the applicant has put forward as almost as a mediation, but an amendment of his proposal, then that proposal is the proposal which VCAT would be considering, given that it's only Council and the applicant that are parties to this particular appeal.
Okay, thank you.
We will now put the motion before us to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Tyson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Adams. Those against? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sharp, is your... All right, Councillor Nation, I believe Councillor Sharp is abstaining. That motion is carried. If we could get Councillor Bedio back in the room for the next item. Item 10.3, report 10.3, is 45 to 69 Woodlands Street, Essendon, lot PS 334464S, and lot 1 TP 553631P. Construction of 25 townhouses, construction of a 3-storey building including office and residential village, the continued use of an office within a general residential zone, construction works within an environmental significance overlay, creation and alteration to road zone category 1, stage subdivision creating 4 lots in a heritage overlay. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharp.
I'll move the officer's recommendation for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Do I have a seconder?
Second it.
Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. This proposal before us is probably one of the bigger proposals that we've ever had in Buckley Ward. When the application was advertised, 275 responses were received, 273 letters of objection, 2 letters of support, but there was also a petition attracting 9,218 signatures. The concerns raised related to environmental impacts, compromised heritage place, reuse of the mansion, loss of views, subdivision, question of law, design detail, neighbourhood character, off-site amenity impacts, on-site amenity impacts, safety, overdevelopment, traffic and waste impacts, compromised infrastructure, construction issues, the evaluation of properties and procedural matters. So we are talking about the very large site on Woodlands Street that has been the home of the St Columban's Mission. For me, growing up, this building, I went to school across the road at St Vincent's, and this building was scary and impenetrable, and we only ever saw people go in and never come out. So it certainly has a very, very long history within Moonee Valley, and the site is of the high point within Essendon, so you are able to garner fantastic views of the city. Obviously, it was, well, not obviously, but it was built by Alexander McCracken in the 1800s, and the mansion is absolutely magnificent. There's no other way to describe it, really. It's quite intact. It's absolutely beautiful to go in and visit. And over the last number of years, I have seen people go in and come out, so it has been a positive. There's always the annual art show that's been held there by Rotary over the last couple of years. But on a more serious note, though, this application is huge, and considering the level of interest from the community, there's also the Save North Park community group that has been established, which have certainly been working hard behind the scenes and organised the petition and the like. So I'm happy to be able to move the refusal. I'll read some grounds of Heritage Victoria, which also refused this application. If the application were approved, it would result in an unacceptable and irreversible detrimental impact on the cultural heritage significance of the registered place. The subdivision of the development would adversely affect the cultural heritage significance and settling of the registered place by physically and legally dividing the site, leaving the mansion separated and isolated from its wider landscape setting, erasing the legibility of the place through intensive townhouse development with associated fencing on separate lots, and separating the mansion from the coach house by subdivision and construction of access ways and fencing, adopting an architectural design that is at odds with the setting and architecture of the mansion and is visually dominant in relation to the existing buildings and site due to its scale, bulk and materiality, and erasing the appreciation of the garden-esque style of garden and jeopardising the remaining trees and vegetation. Now, on that note, there's a number of significant trees on this site too, and there's just a number of trees in general which house a huge amount of bird life that you just don't have the opportunity to see, particularly in this neck of the woods of Essendon, which is pretty much landlocked. So I guess we shall hope for the best in this regard, but happy to be able to support the refusal here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. It's true what Councillor Sharp said. The McCracken family own this and built this mansion, and it's a part of Moonee Valley's history. But the McCrackens were very famous for having the McCracken chicken farm, and that was pretty much all of North Essendon was their actual farm. We've even got a road named after the McCracken family. So the heritage of this place is very embedded in Moonee Valley and the old Essendon Shire. Councillor Sharp was very thorough in the reason why I've seconded the motion of the refusal. I pretty much can't say much more than to concur with my colleague. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to add to both Councillor Sharp and Councillor Sypek, who I agree with what they have said. North Park is an unprecedented property within Essendon and Moonee Valley, and we must seek to maintain its significance to our community for the benefit of present and future generations. The garden setting contributes to the grandeur of the buildings on site, and the cultural heritage significance will be severely compromised if they are separated, and that is why I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to draw attention to, I thank the other councillors for their speaking on this motion, but I wanted to draw attention to the Heritage Officer's recommendation as well, that with a lack of certainty for the future of the mansion, it places the actual home under threat. The central issue that we have here is, while the application doesn't seek to make any changes to the mansion, the Heritage Victoria has given a clear indication of how the application will destroy the significance of the site by separating the mansion from its grounds and surrounding outbuildings, because the three components together speak to the history of the site. To subdivide them is to interrupt that and to irreparably damage our built cultural heritage on the site. And without a clear future for that mansion, it falls under threat of falling into disrepair.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Don't believe there was any opposition, so I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. We now move to report 10.4, being 12 Station Avenue, Ascot Vale. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
I would like to move the officer's recommendation with an addition to 1A, such that 1A reads, the proposed colours and material to be in accordance with the plans submitted on 4th of September 2020, Revision B, prepared by YBL Remus, close bracket, excluding the front facade, which should closely replicate the predominantly white vertical elements as reflected on the cover page of the Town Planning Issue A, March 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, do you want to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. So as we heard earlier, there were quite a few residents who are very concerned about this particular application, and we heard that in the questions this evening. And I thank residents for attending to planning applications in the area and attending to the detail of them, because sometimes it is the detail that can make an application fit into the neighbourhood or not, and it's our job really to pay close attention to some of that detail in supporting particular applications. And with this application, there obviously were some concerns that were put forward. There were concerns about the bins, about parking, about demolition of the house that currently exists, about the contribution to the street context, about the concerns about the colour, the parapets, the density. And so we've had to really look closely at the detail of the application to make sure that we are approving something that satisfies some of the quite stringent overlays that apply to this particular site. And one of those in particular is the neighbourhood character overlay, the Schedule 3, which is a particularly specific character overlay for Station Avenue in Ascot Vale. Station Avenue has quite a number of Victorian homes that front onto the streetscape and that have similar parapets, and it is a lovely streetscape with those intact Victorian buildings that are there. So I can completely understand the concern from residents to preserve that and to make sure that what is built there enhances that. And the neighbourhood character requires that the rendered parapet frontages that have highly significant neighbourhood character are respected in new dwellings. It also requires that any second-storey elements are sufficiently recessed so that the single-storey component is the visually dominant from the street. So with that neighbourhood character overlay in place, the planners have looked very carefully at this application. They're requiring the windows to be made 30% larger to make sure that they replicate the Victorian element, that level of detail. They have asked for the colour scheme, the amended colour scheme. It's now in lighter colours, and I've added in this requirement that the what I've called the wings, the white vertical elements, also be in white. And I know that will satisfy a number of the concerns of residents who've spoken to me over the past couple of days, or I hope it will. I have looked carefully at the wall on the boundaries. There's one non-compliance with clause 55. However, that particular wall does butt up against a wall on the other boundaries, so there is no impact on open space with respect to that element of non-compliance. And the second story, looking closely at that to make sure that it is sufficiently recessed so that when you stand on the street, what you do see is the continuation of the parapet context that is what is preserved within the neighbourhood character overlay. So I know that this, from the perspective of objectors, is an imperfect application, and I respect the concerns that have been put forward. Maybe another councillor might like to speak to the elements of bins and parking that I perhaps won't cover myself right now. I know it's probably imperfect in the eyes of objectors, but I think it's vastly improved from the very first version. The amended version has some significant improvements, and I hope that those improvements do make a lovely streetscape into the future for the beautiful little avenue that leads to Ascot Vale train station.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Isa. I won't speak for too long. Councillor Isa mentioned the issues of parking and bins. There is a condition in the planning permit to have the applicant consider making space for the rubbish bins to attractively sit behind the front fence of those residents, which will hopefully ameliorate any concerns there. And each of the units has a single car garage on site, and I think we heard from the CEO earlier that no visitor permits will be granted to the residents, future residents of those units. In general, the development supports the city plan of accessibility and diversity of housing, as well as being close to local open space, public transport and shops, supporting our vision of 20-minute neighbourhoods. It represents good environmentally sustainable design, and I believe it's a net improvement for the benefit of the community.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Isa, Councillor Nation, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Adams. All those against? Councillor Sharp. That motion is carried. Report 10.5 is the proposed transfer of land from formerly discontinued road, 112 St Leonard's Road, Ascot Vale. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Tyson.
I'd like to move a motion to accept the officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Tyson, would you like to speak to your motion or the motion?
So this is relating to a decision by the City of Essendon going back to 1977. Essentially, a discontinued road which was transferred. The motion is to transfer it to the owner of 112. Due process has been followed. There's nothing too controversial. Two ward councillors met with the parties back in July. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Councillor Bedio, wish to speak to the motion?
Nothing further to add, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just by way of a bit of history there, back in 1977, the owners of the land at the time were offered the land for a nominal fee of $1, but the transfer was not completed, and council officers reporting to council earlier this year couldn't find a reason for the lack of the completion, but it came to attention that the transfer had never been completed. The officers' report recommended that the transfer be completed under the same conditions as were offered by the City of Essendon back in the 70s. Objections from the neighbouring property were heard, and as Councillor Tyson's mentioned, a conference was held where submissions were heard by ward councillors. That was due to the objections, the new statutory process which was followed, but the same outcome is recommended, so supporting the officer's recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Tyson. Sorry, please keep your hands up. Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Isa, Councillor Nation, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Adams. Those against? Councillor Sypek. That motion is carried. Report 10.6 is Council Management of the Pandemic and focus on recovery aligned to state government roadmap. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you. I've got an alternative. Read it out.
Present it. Yes, please.
The Council resolves to endorse continuation of the application of the hardship policy to offer a maximum 50% fee reduction to eligible businesses on their food and health premises registration renewals fees due in January 2021, increase the COVID-19 recovery grants 2020-21 annual budget by $100,000, increase the budget envelope for the outdoor dining program from $300,000 as previously endorsed to $500,000, reflecting the receipt of a $500,000 funding agreement from the state government to support outdoor trading. Endorse the provision of temporary, point B is the extra point, endorse the provision of temporary toilet facilities in Woodlands Park, the Green Spine and Queen's Park to better provide for community use and activation during the upcoming holiday season. E, note the current status of service reopening attachment A. F, note the financial impacts of Council's response to the pandemic, which will be further detailed in the mid-year budget review. And G, write to MAV advocating for financial assistance to local government from state government due to loss of rates, fees and charges.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. There's obviously a lot to cover with this COVID-19 focus on recovery. So I'll just mention a few things because I'm sure other councillors will want to have a chat about various aspects to this. Obviously, I guess point A, the continuation of the hardship policy for food and health premises. That whole segment of our business community have certainly done it hard this year. And I did have a food and health business. I do not have one any longer, so I am fully aware of the impacts that COVID have had on those type of businesses. So I think it's a fantastic initiative of council to be able to continue with the rebate on the registration fees. Grants are obviously highly sought after, and we have had a huge response to them, so having the annual budget increased will only help with applications. Importantly, there's two notices of motion tonight regarding the toilet facilities in parks. Because they're under notices of motions, we can't have budget implications on them, so hence point D, endorsing the provision of temporary toilet facilities in Woodlands Park, the Green Spine and Queen's Park to better provide for community use and activation. I know that Woodlands Park has been so busy on the weekends with thousands, probably 1,000 people a day actually at least. So it's really, the toilet in Woodlands Park is really, really needed. I'll let the other councillors speak about the other locations because I'm not really up to speed with them. But I guess to finish up, we as a council group and council are certainly trying our hardest in order to make sure that our community and our businesses and our clubs and everything, we're trying to be really on the front foot to enable COVID recovery with all aspects of our community. So certainly pleased to be able to move this report. And I look forward to writing to the MAV for government assistance too, because that will be needed.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I totally agree with Councillor Sharp. Once again, she's given a full detailed report of what this issue is. I just want to make mention of the Moonee Valley community. I've spoken to a lot of traders, a lot of small business owners in the city, and they were very, very pleased to see the support during the past couple of months of how our community supported a lot of our businesses. And it's just good to hear, to see that there was support there, especially for the cafes, the ones that did takeaway. They said that they saw a massive increase in their takeaway deliveries. But saying all that, this is a complicated, there's a lot of things in this thing, and I believe that we're doing the right thing, and hopefully we can get this passed, and hopefully we get the support of my colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Isa.
It's been a terrible year for so many businesses and so many community organisations, sporting organisations and arts organisations, to name two particular sectors that have been particularly hard hit. And it has been, as someone who was not on council during most of COVID, it has been really heartening to see how the previous council did do what they could to support businesses, to support arts groups, and my own arts group was a recipient of an arts grant, and it was greatly appreciated. It meant that we could pay someone who had lost all of their work due to COVID. So I think council, prior to me being here, has been done a really terrific job of trying to help people. But I do want to, reach out to residents and businesses to ask you to please let us know if there are other things that you do need council to be doing. If there are things that you can see the breadth of support that council is able to offer, whether it's through a grants program, whether it's through portable toilets, outdoor dining spaces. We haven't had a huge pickup of outdoor dining spaces, perhaps in some areas where people thought that might work quite well. So perhaps if businesses or residents would like to reach out to council to ask for more support, I'd really love to be part of an ongoing team that's able to support our community, because it's not over yet, and the recovery's only really just begun. And I look forward, Councillor Sharp, to hopefully some work being done through MAV to really help the state government recognise where some of the load of the great initiatives that the state government has taken to ease the burden, the load has actually fallen onto local government, and look forward perhaps to some further assistance there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hodgson.
I'll keep it brief. Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to draw attention to the section of the report that covers service delivery and the council workforce, and acknowledge the hard work of our council workers who continued, those frontline staff delivering critical services such as waste management, aged care services and childcare, and for services like our libraries, who responded very quickly to the changing circumstances of the pandemic and continued to deliver services to our community. So just an acknowledgement and thank you to them.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I really like this motion, but I think that it is also important that we touch on the financial implications that we've had from of COVID-19. Moonee Valley, along with every other municipality, has struggled big time through COVID, and it is hurting us. And we're quite fortunate in a way that we're in such a good financial position before COVID hit that we've been able to take some of the force. So just briefly, the lost income from our fees and charges through the closure of various council services in the 1920 year, it was 1.2 million, and the 2020-21 year was 6.8 million, with a total loss of just over $8 million. So that's obviously quite significant. As I said, we were in a good position beforehand. We're hoping we don't get a third wave, but we have to be prudent with the dollars that we spend. So we have put together a really good plan, and we can definitely, we can afford it at this stage because we manage things really well, and credit to the staff that have helped put everything together. But it's no means splash for cash everywhere. We do have to be mindful of the dollars, but we also have to play our part in terms of keeping, as Councillor Hodgson has said, keeping people employed and ensuring the economy keeps ticking over. Also, the other thing that I wanted to touch on, and I don't want to speak so much about toilets tonight, but I do feel like they're going to be brought up a bit. Obviously, as Councillor Sharp mentioned, there are temporary facilities in Woodlands Park, the Green Spine and Queen's Park. I know that there will be people in the community who will say, oh, what about here, what about here? But it is just temporary facilities, one in each ward, just to get us through this extra little bit of time, which is really I suppose it's one of the positives that can come out of COVID, that people are using parks and barbecues and whatnot a lot more. So to be able to get those temporary facilities in, see whether they're needed and used, which I would think that they will be quite well, and we can see how they go over the upcoming holiday season. So get excited, Airport West residents, you are finally getting your toilet in the Green Spine.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Report 10.7 is the appointment of Independent Member Audit and Risk Committee. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Byrne?
Apologies. Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Isa. Councillor Byrne, do you wish to speak to this motion?
Just briefly, Mayor, just that Council's resolving to appoint Mr Jeff Harry as an independent member of the Audit and Risk Committee for a period of 3 years, starting from the next audit meeting. This has obviously gone through quite a significant process, and it's in line with the committee's charter. So I would like to thank Mr John Gavin's term as the independent committee member, which has now concluded. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Isa. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item 10.8, report 10.8 is Financial Performance Report September 2020. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
I'll support the, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
Well, I was leaving the bad news for this particular motion, Councillor Byrne. And Councillor Byrne has in fact summarised some of the information that's also contained within this report that does detail where the losses have been felt by the council organisation during COVID, and it's largely come from the services being closed and fees and charges being reducing council's income, but also there's been some losses related to the collection of rates, and very much appreciate for residents that rates have been a pressure point for many residents, and just to make sure that all residents know of the hardship policy that Council put in place and that there are mechanisms to try to assist people. Even though there has been that difficulty, it's interesting that there's still a very high percentage, I think 3/4 of the rates still came in. So thank you to people who are able to work their finances around that. There's obviously a little bit of some cash flow bumps, and thank you very much to the staff who are helping Council to work, helping the organisation to work through those, seeking support from other levels of government where possible, and helping us to stay on top of things during what has been a difficult year for all sectors, and particularly for local government sector.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak?
Nothing further to add. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Otherwise, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Report 10.9 is the proposed road discontinuance and sale of land right-of-way abutting rear of 46 Elfred Road and 51 Amelia Avenue, Essendon. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Tyson.
I'd like to move a motion to accept the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Tyson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Quite straightforward, Mayor. This is another road discontinuance. The two neighbours that abut the land have agreed to purchase it, and it's gone through the proper process.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Councillor Sharp? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item 10.10, proposed road discontinuance and sale of land right-of-way abutting rear of 149 to 153 Buckley Street, Essendon. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to say that this motion commences the statutory process of discontinuing a right-of-way at the rear of these Buckley Street lots. Public notification will occur through publication on the digital Moonee Valley Leader and on the Council's website, and submissions will be invited. Any submitters who wish to be heard in support of their submissions can be so by a committee of ward councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Report 10.11 is Local Government Renewable Power Purchase Agreement Project. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
Oh, well, I'm really pleased to move this motion, Mayor. It's progressing something that I hope will succeed. It's giving authority to the CEO to be part of the negotiation for the power purchase agreement to finalise our council's corporate electricity use being 100% renewable, and that's just would be a terrific outcome if we can work with all of those other councils to negotiate that. Darebin is leading this. It's been ongoing for some time, and hopefully the combined effort of councils working very hard to bring about what will then be the capacity to negotiate an outcome such that the cost of our energy will in will not be greater than business as usual, and will in fact be less than business as usual if we were to go out solo and seek 100% renewable energy on our own. So it is a situation where councils are working together to reduce the carbon emissions of is it 38 councils in Victoria. And very, very pleased that this is coming, hopefully, to fruition in the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Bedio, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I don't have much to add, but just seconding Councillor Isa. The application currently, the tender process currently has 47 Victorian councils involved. It's currently led by Darebin City Council. It's well done to the sustainability team for promoting this process. Indications at this point seem to that we should see a saving in comparison to the existing process, which is, I believe, through MAV, how we currently get our power. So, yeah, well done to the sustainability team.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just very quickly to say it's very exciting. The Moonee Valley Green Action Plan has a target of a 95% emission reduction by 2040. The report outlines that electricity use is the source of 70% of our emissions. So this agreement takes us a big step towards that 2040 target of 95% emission reduction.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Report 10.12 is receipt of oaths and affirmations of office. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. I will move the officer's recommendation.
Hope we're going to receive them. It'll be a little bit awkward. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Byrne, do you want to speak to this motion?
I will be extremely brief, Mayor. I don't think this one is particularly contentious, but I think it is something that's very important that we do, which is receiving and minuting the oaths and affirmation of office signed by each and every single one of us on the 17th of November. And also the Code of Conduct, noting that we will be adopting a new councillor Code of Conduct prior to the 24th of February 2021. So obviously an extremely important piece of the puzzle, but happy to move it, and I'm hoping that I get support for it.
Oh my. Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Tyson.
Nothing much to add to a very straightforward recommendation. Councils have done a fantastic oath or affirmation of office.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. That concludes our reports. We now move to item 11, notices of motion. We have 10 notices of motions this evening. Notice of motion 11.1 2020-2023 is BMX mountain bike facilities in Moonee Valley. I call on Councillor Ava Adams to present her notice of motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that Council resolves to receive a report in early 2021 regarding off-road BMX and MTB activity in Moonee Valley, providing point 1, an update on community-led BMX/MTB track and jump activity in Moonee Valley. Point 2, management actions undertaking regarding point 1. Point 3, a summary of the consultation results in relation to young people outdoors that is currently underway. And point 4, an outline of the options available to Council to assess the potential locations, costs and benefits of establishing one or more BMX/MTB tracks within Moonee Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. It was evident during COVID lockdown the lack of public recreation facilities for our preteens and teens. Bike jumps have been a popular activity and our young people are asking for a permanent solution. This motion seeks to formalise a response to our community in the form of a report to council so that we can outline the options available in our municipality so that a permanent solution can be realised. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Sharp, just to speak to the notice of motion.
Thank you, Mayor. This issue was certainly got pretty ramped up during over the last few months. I think we had the meeting in August where my urgent item of business went up to talk about the bike jumps and particularly the one around down at Aberfeldy Park. So certainly happy to support Councillor Adams with her notice of motion. It is an issue that we need to certainly look at and get sorted out along with our youth. We certainly need to involve the kids who use these tracks as well, because I think then we'll be able to create something amazing with their input. So alongside this too, we've also got we're looking at Aberfeldy Park as well to see if potentially that track could stay there, but there's other locations as well. So this notice of motion certainly complements what's already been done, and hopefully we'll have a holistic look at it and have some fantastic outcomes.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This issue has been going on since 2004, and I remember the BMX track was asked for back then, and a decision had to be made by council whether they do it at Rosehill Park, whether it was going to be a skate park or whether it was going to be a BMX park. And the decision by council back then was to make it into a skate park. And somewhere along the line, they came up with a proposal to put the BMX track in Border Park Reserve. That's the one on Keilor. You know, when you go down Keilor Park Drive and you've got the palm trees on the left-hand side? Well, there's a massive chunk of land right next door to Vic Rail, and that's where the proposal was. But that's somehow fallen off the track. And the desire for BMX tracks fell off, obviously, and now with new generations coming through, it popped up again back in 2009 and 2010, died off again, and now it's popped up again. So it's a good option. I think we've got some traction behind this BMX track, and we could probably dig up some old plans for the BMX track at Border Drive. That's one of the possibilities. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Isa.
I think it's been something that's been felt across all wards. We've certainly had a number of jumps built in the Canterbury Stables area, and residents have been both supportive of kids finding creative things to do, but also worried for their own safety and worried for the safety of the outdoor spaces and the flora and fauna. So trying to find some solutions for kids in the future. I think one of those things that we've learnt from COVID, the things that we perhaps can plan a little bit better, take on board the views of young people and really put together something that works well, hopefully, for years to come. So thanks very much for putting it forward, Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Notice of motion 11.2, being 2020-24 Lagunaria Pattersonia street trees. I call on Councillor Narelle Sharp to present her notice of motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Take notice that it is my intention to move that Council resolves to 1, undertake investigations and receive a report by March 2021 on the management and planned replacement of Lagnunaria Pattersonia trees throughout the municipality with suitable alternative street trees. And point 2, the Council show empathy toward residents who raise serious concern about these trees.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. I think it's Lagunaria. I think that first N in the title up there is incorrect.
I am more than happy to second this
I have
one.
a seconder, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Thank you. Yes. So this issue's been highlighted to me recently by a number of residents in various pockets within our municipality. So certainly not subject to a certain area per se. But I'll read this email, which is a perfect description of these trees. Every day we are affected by significant skin irritations and glass-like splinters in our hands and feet, which is painful and unbearable. These splinters become embedded in outdoor surfaces, including furniture, watering cans and garden hoses, as well as washing while drying on the clothesline. The tree in question is a Lagunaria Petersonia species, which are commonly known for their unpleasant seed bombs they drop. These seeds are full of invisible hairs that cause a painful itch and feel like glass-like splinters when they come in contact with your skin. They are currently noted in the MVCC Tree Management Plan as a tree no longer planted by council, with the rationale being seeds are known to cause skin irritation. So basically, these trees in some people can have major health implications, particularly in kids. Other trees can cause hay fever, but luckily with hay fever, over-the-counter medications can help greatly. But there's no such over-the-counter medication for children or adults that have a serious and adverse reaction to these trees and their tiny glass-like needles. I should note that our trees are highly valued in Moonee Valley, and I'm certainly loath to suggest to even remove trees. But when our residents come to us detailing issues such as these, I believe that we need to act. Recently, we removed a tree that had caused a resident's fence to crack, which is completely understandable, and I certainly don't have a problem with it. But when I hear that council sort of isn't really looking into trees that can cause severe skin irritations, I get a little concerned, hence my notice of motion. I should state that I do have first-hand experience with these trees. My youngest daughter caused major skin irritations with her, which no creams or medications could alleviate. And when younger, she was a complete red, rashy, irritable little ball who most of the time was completely inconsolable. So just as has been detailed by a resident in the email earlier that I read out, kids can't go outside if they're that prone to such an adverse reaction to these type of trees, and it does go for adults as well, but kids are obviously just they're a bit more prone to things like that happening. So hence my point, I suppose, in the motion that council needs to show empathy to residents when concerns about these trees are raised. And being a health concern, it's certainly no one size fits all, but in general terms, the resident that sent me the email regarding the tree certainly has described the situation 100% correct. So I hope that councillors can support this notice of motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I fully support Councillor Sharp in the removal of these certain species, but I just want to also bring to your attention that up my end of town, the old tea trees, the melaleucas, they are also a species that cause a lot of awkward situations. They actually leave a lot of pencil pine needles as well too, and a lot of people slip on them during when they're shedding their pencil pines on the footpath, and you don't really see them. And I've had a number of complaints over the years of elderly people losing their footing. Then, not to mention, the old Keilor Council back in the 60s decided to what they call bring the country to the city, and they planted improper gum trees that grow to a proportion that even Skylab might have to dodge sometimes. So, I mean, these trees are absolutely huge. And I think a couple of years back, I brought a notice of motion to have a look at these trees as well, that caused a lot of damage to our infrastructure, just like the species that Councillor Sharp said. So I might be foreshadowing a notice of motion to bring to see if we can remove the melaleucas, and because the melaleucas belong down the beach. They don't belong in Essendon. We don't have a beach. So that could be a possibility in the near future. And also these huge gum trees which cause infrastructure damage and it's costing the city a lot of money. So I wouldn't mind having a review of some of these big trees. But on the other hand, if we're going to remove a tree, I'd like to plant 2 trees in replacement, so we don't lose that canopy, so we regenerate our canopy plantation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm in support of this motion because it will be receiving a report back. Generally speaking, I don't know. I actually am really looking forward to the report back because I wouldn't be for removing trees, generally speaking. We have put up with these trees for a particular long period of time, but then I definitely respect the fact that a lot of people have significant issues with them. But I think that I hope the report touches on it potentially being an opt-in system as opposed to us going around with the chainsaw and removing all of these trees. There's potentially some trees that if they are minding their own business, there's no one really around them, then they wouldn't necessarily have to come out. And there's obviously some that are more problematic than others. And I think the ones that are particularly problematic, as Councillor Sharp, you said, the person who's contacted you, and I've had a few people contact me as well. I think those ones definitely need to be looked at, but let's not, pick on all the trees, but looking forward to the report coming back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Isa?
Being someone who's known to throw themselves in front of a tree to save it, I really need to qualify that my support is also support for the report, and certainly appreciate that that trees do cause allergies. My own child, one of my children also suffers terrible hay fever from the plane trees, so I completely appreciate the difficulty that some species cause for people, and really look forward to a report that helps us to navigate the difficult task of working through the situation where mature trees are causing issues, and to help us as a council to work out the best thing to do in that situation. And also maintain our canopy targets and to work towards that. So it might not be planting 2 trees in its place, Councillor Sypek. It might be more like 5 or 6. So we'll get the report back and see how we can best manage these different needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item 11.3, Notice of Motion number 2020-25, Toilets in Woodlands Park. I call on Councillor Narelle Sharp to present her notice of motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Take notice that it is my intention to move the Council resolves to 1, undertake investigations and receive a report regarding the demand, potential locations and costs for additional public toilet facilities at Woodlands Park, Essendon by 31st January 2021. Point 2, investigate the installation of temporary toilets in the interim. And point 3, determine the current service level of cleaning the existing toilet block and investigate whether additional servicing can be accommodated.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Adams. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Thank you. Yes, during COVID lockdown, our parks have certainly been inundated with people, which has been fantastic to see. For me personally, Woodlands Park, going past there on the weekends and seeing just people sprawled from go to woe over the place has been just amazing. It's really, really, really nice to look at. But it obviously proves how valuable our parks are, and I think they're a lot more valuable to our residents now just because of what we've all gone through. But in saying that, I think we've potentially just missed the opportunity, I guess, in the master plan that we've recently completed, and all the works down at Woodlands Park, which look fantastic. But I think we might have just missed the opportunity at thinking about an extra toilet block, because the toilet block there is quite old, and I've had a lot of complaints about the cleanliness of that, hence my point 3. So I'd certainly be hopeful to, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing the report back early next year about about a permanent extra toilet down there. I have no doubt that it will be welcomed by our community. Point 2 is relating to the temporary toilets. I'd like to thank the CEO for help with getting that into the COVID motion earlier, so I won't really discuss that, but basically over the holiday period we'll be able to have temporary toilets there in the interim. My voice is going, so I will end it there, and hopefully pretty much it's, at the end of the day, it's pretty self-explanatory notice of motion, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to this motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, just to add, over the summer it's obviously going to be extremely busy on the weekends, and with just one public toilet, the wait time is just so long. It would be great to see action for the installation of temporary toilets immediately, so I totally welcome that. And due to the heavy use, I do support investigating whether additional servicing and cleaning can be undertaken as part of the current schedule. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item 11.4 is notice of motion number 2020-26, soccer strategy. I call on Councillor Narelle Sharp to present her notice of motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Take notice that it is my intention to move that Council resolves to receive a report by the end of March 2021 regarding the development of a municipal-wide soccer strategy involving all clubs with a view to future-proofing participation in soccer within Moonee Valley. The report should include, but not be limited to, A, demand projections for participation, B, the extent of service provision for the sport of soccer in Moonee Valley, and C, assessment of the deficiencies and potential improvements to existing playing fields and pavilions. Point 2, between now and 14th March 2021, or the last day of competition for the summer tenant, whichever is first, will support summer and winter tenant clubs enter into agreements with each other to provide pre-season access to winter clubs. Where agreements are entered, a copy of the agreement letter or memo is provided to Council prior to the agreement commencing. The agreement must include the agreed permitted access days, times and any other conditions negotiated. Point B, the tenant club summer is responsible for managing the agreement, liable for any damage incurred as a result of the agreement and cannot profit from the agreement. Point C, delegate to the Chief Executive Officer to suspend any agreement where Council officers identify asset management, community or safety concerns. Point D, the agreement will override the 2021 pre-season allocation process for these sites. Point 3, request the CEO to investigate the opportunity to open J.H. Allen Sports Field for training ahead of the winter 2021 season, making a determination as soon as possible by Tuesday, 15th December 2020 at the latest.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillors, a seconder for that notice of motion? Councillor Adams. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Thank you. Look, it's pretty self-explanatory, but Moonee Valley needs a soccer strategy as demand for this sport is certainly growing within our community. As per the dot points provided, I think we need to look at the demand projections for participation, the extent of service provision for the sport of soccer, and the assessment of the deficiencies and potential improvements to existing playing fields and pavilions. And obviously it's all with a view to future-proofing participation in soccer within Moonee Valley. So I'm certainly sure that a plan like this will be welcomed by the clubs. Point 2 refers to allowing clubs to reach agreements between themselves for ground use over this upcoming pre-season training period. We know that all of our clubs are desperate to get back to training and what they love to do. We also know that sport and our clubs contribute to improved mental and physical well-being within our community. So I believe that we need to do things potentially differently this year in order to ensure that clubs have the greatest access to our grounds. We need to get our kids back into sport, and we need to get our men and women back into sport. So the points of 2 to D, A to D are pretty self-explanatory as well. So hopefully councillors can support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to this motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Nothing, not much further to add other than soccer participation is rapidly growing in Moonee Valley, and I support this motion to develop a soccer strategy for the municipality. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 11.5 is notice of motion number 2020-27, public toilets in public open spaces. I call on Councillor Samantha Byrne to present her notice of motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that the CEO prepares a report to Council reviewing the provision of public toilet facilities in public open spaces, that the report should include consideration of, but not limited to, opportunities and associated timelines for temporary facilities, particularly in areas where people congregate for picnics or that provide public use barbecues. Second point, opportunities for the wider community to be consulted about the provision of public toilet facilities and their preferred location. And the next point, a longer term plan considering the timing and resourcing of public toilet facilities in public open spaces.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I have just had to slightly adjust the wording of the first dot point because I did have Queen's Park and the Green Spine in there, but obviously due to the previous toilet report, we now have going to go ahead with temporary facilities there. But there are still plenty of other public open spaces and public use barbecue areas that there is a potential to be able to put in temporary facilities over the upcoming period. So, as I've mentioned before, we have spoken a lot about toilets, but I suppose this is a bit of a strategy to go forward, to say that COVID has presented us with challenges that we may not have seen before, and some of them are good challenges. I think that it is great when I see people often ordering from the local businesses, getting their grazing boxes, and having a great time down at the parks. And we want to encourage those sorts of things. But it's really hard to have a picnic if there's no facilities nearby. And if we can consider toilets over summer, but also a long-term option, I'm of the understanding that toilets are quite expensive, not only to install, but also to maintain. So there is going to be that fine balance, but it is particularly popular with people talking about toilets at the moment, Mayor. I did put it on my Facebook page and my Instagram page just to sort of see what the response would be, and I didn't realise how many people wanted to talk to me about toilets. So there was quite a few really good ideas that just came from a simple Facebook post, and so I feel that if we do consult the community about where they want a toilet, I think we'll get a really good response, potentially much better than we get for a lot of our council surveys. So some of the things that came forward, obviously we've spoken already about Woodlands, Green Spine and Queen's Park. They definitely came through quite strong. But there's obviously a need around Steel Creek somewhere now, whether that's at the bottom of Coghlan Street in Niddrie, around Valley Lake, exactly where that would be something to look into. Canning Street, LT Thompson, a lot of talk around Bowes Avenue. The boathouse was an interesting one because obviously there's a playground there, but when the cafe's closed, there's not a close facility until you walk into the city of Maribyrnong. You know, we do share facilities a bit. Monte Carlo, there's also talk about just unlocking the ones we have more often and upgrading the toilet facilities that have been around for many, many years without an upgrade. So, as I said, people love to talk about them. So we may be opening a can of worms here. A can of worms is an appropriate saying. I've got to be careful with what I say because there's been a few jokes come my way about this toilet notice of motion. But I think that it's something that we get the ball rolling on, that we take the community on the journey, and we see where it ends up. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to this motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to briefly say, I think it's one of the most well-performing social media posts I've seen for a long time. So certainly a lot of community interest and support Councillor Byrne's motion.
Thanks, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Sypek.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Byrne, I was wondering if you could probably put another dot point in your notice of motion.
Councillor Sypek, you can move the amendment. I won't be able to, as I was the mover of the original motion.
Okay,
I'll
move an amendment.
Move an amendment. Okay.
It's in regards to decommissioning some toilets, and the two that
Councillor Sypek, do you want to speak to the current motion, or do you want to move your amendment?
I'll move an amendment.
Do you need time to prepare words for your amendment? No.
It's very simple.
Okay.
Just to decommission 2 toilets that are not used anymore, and one of them's at the Airport West Football Club. It's been closed for the last 6.
So, Johnny, sorry, Councillor Sypek. Just so we need the words for your
decommission the toilet that's not being used at the Airport West Football Club, and decommission the toilet at the end of Military Road just before the bend.
Okay, so that is the motion before us. Governance, do we need time to potentially put that amendment to... So, Councillor Sypek, so just again through governance, could you read the motion, Ms Hopper, could you please read the motion?
Decommissioned toilets no longer in use at the Airport West Football Club and at Military Road.
At the end of Military Road.
So, councillors, the motion before us is that, as read by Councillor Sypek, and will shortly be on the screen. I will need a seconder to that motion for it to then be considered. So, councillors, do I have a seconder to that amendment? Councillor Bedio seconds that amendment. So we now go into debate for the amendment only. So this is debate for the amendment only, with not the rest of the motion as originally put. Councillor Sypek, do you wish to speak to your amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. And the 2 toilets that I'm talking in regards to, they were built back in the 50s or 60s, and they're the old concrete stone toilets. The one at Airport West hasn't been used for over 6 years, and the club's always been asking, can it be closed down and decommissioned and brought down, because it create more parking spots, but it's never been used, and it's just an ugly sight. The one at the end of Military Road is right at the end of the shopping centre, and it's also was built in the 50s and 60s, and it's hardly ever used, and it's just not in the right spot. So that could be decommissioned and beautified the whole area. So, look, a report, whatever, but they're just not being used, and they could be improved in both spots. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Bedio, do you want to speak just to the formal amendment on hand?
Yes, just on Councillor Sypek's amendment. I seconded the motion, not necessarily that I agree, but that's because I don't actually know the toilets that you're talking about. But under the pretense that this is a report to be provided to council that will give us some clarity, and then we don't have to necessarily act on that advice, but we can get some additional information on it. And I think it probably makes sense, and as the notice of motion is public toilets in public open spaces, to roll out new toilets or to discontinue ones that are not providing any use or impacting amenity.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Does any other councillor wish to speak?
Just a point of clarification, whether the wording should be decommissioning of toilets?
Look, at this stage, that's the motion as put, so we can't just make small adjustments, even if it makes them read better. CEO, that's correct advice, that we can't, yeah.
Point of clarification, please.
Bit of clarification, Councillor Sharp.
We're asking for a report for this point too, yes?
So, Councillor Sharp, from reading that the dot point comes underneath
I can't read it.
The report, my understanding is that all those dot points are what would be in the report, not a separate, completely separate project. Councillor Byrne, do you want to speak to this amendment?
A point of clarification first. Through you, Mayor, but probably towards Councillor Sypek, just for clarity, the toilet's no longer in use at Airport West Football Club. You're not talking about the ones right on Etzel Street. You're talking...
No, the ones up the back where the old pavilion used to be.
Right. Yeah, no, that's okay. I was just clarifying. I will speak
The amendment, yes.
to the amendment. So in terms of decommissioning toilets, I probably wouldn't be for that. I think we're going into a phase of people using toilets more as opposed to getting rid of them. In saying that, it is only a report. The Airport West one is interesting because there obviously are those ones on Etzel Street for public use that are open. So there are ones close. The ones on Military Road, I'm very mindful of the ageing population in Avondale Heights, and I can't think of other really close public toilets, even though those ones are revolting. Whether we would want to actually decommission those ones, it might be a better idea to refurbish them. So I think in terms of just getting the report back, I'm sure the report will thrash out in terms of what we need for toilets. But if the plumbing's already in place, the idea of getting rid of ones in Avondale Heights, not really sure about that one. Airport West, not sure what's in the master plan, but I suppose there are only so many toilets you need to be cleaning and servicing regularly, and if they are locked up and taking up space, then that's a different thing. But yeah, happy with the report. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the amendment on the floor? If not, we will put that to a vote for the amendment to be accepted. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. So that now becomes the substantive motion. At this stage, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson had spoken. Councillor Sypek, you are mid-address, so if you'd like to continue speaking, you may.
Look, thank you for your support, councillors. And like I said, this is just a report. This is not that we have to do this. I take note of what Councillor Byrne says about the elderly people down Avondale Heights. And if the report comes back and says, maybe we should knock this one down and put up a new one, that could be the option. I don't know. The only thing I could think of is a lot of people that go to those shops actually drive there because a lot of the houses are quite a distance away, so most people will drive to those areas. But there are some that would walk, and look, it's just a report, and hopefully our officers will come back with a detailed report of what's in, what's out, where should we put one, do we decommission. But the one at the football club, the one at the old pavilion, the club's been asking for it to be closed down because it's just not being used at all. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the entire motion? Councillor Isa.
Just very briefly, and I won't put this in as an amendment, but I'll perhaps ask the CEO or other officers to perhaps take note of the point that I'm making, which was something that I had in mind but then was reminded of it when I quickly looked through the 50 comments that responded to your post, Councillor Byrne, and there was a comment, I can't actually think from whom, that just was a reminder that during the election campaign, the Association for Children with Disability did write to us all about the lack of facilities within our municipality. In fact, it's toilets that have change facilities for adults with a disability. And I understood from the information that we were given by the group that we don't have any such toilets within Moonee Valley. And so without wishing to move an amendment, I am hoping that the report might also reflect on the types of toilets that are publicly available and whether they are inclusive toilets, gender-neutral toilets, and toilets for both adults and children with disabilities, so universal access facilities. That would be terrific. Thank you.
Just as a point of clarification, Mayor, I think that would probably be able to come into where it says consideration of but not limited to. If you could just check that is something that could go into that report through the CEO.
So, CEO, point of clarification by Councillor Byrne, that Councillor Isaa's comments and requests could potentially be incorporated into this report as per that motion.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, yes, that can be incorporated. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. All right. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the substantive motion? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item 11.6 is notice of motion number 2020-28, shovel-ready projects. I call on Councillor Samantha Byrne to present her notice of motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that the CEO prepares a report to Council in early 2021 identifying capital works projects in MV 2040 which could be made shovel-ready within the next 2 years. The report should specifically prioritise and identify eligible shovel-ready projects which Council may draw upon in applications for future state and federal government funding opportunities, noting increased opportunities to obtain funding partnerships in response to COVID-19.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Adams. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to say that we're done with toilets, but I suppose we could potentially put toilets in here as well, but I will refrain from doing that. But needless to say, 2020 was a year like no one expected, and there's been a lot of negatives that have come from the year, but with that we need to create opportunities, and that is what this notice of motion is intending on doing. There's obviously been catastrophic effects on COVID with unemployment rates rising dramatically. In mid-November, Australia-wide, they were about 7%, in Victoria 7.4%. Prior to COVID, they were sitting around that 5 to 5.5%, which a lot of people would still say was too high even at that point, but they have increased significantly. But what we have learnt from this is what do the state and federal government potentially want to do, and that is job creation, and a lot of it very quickly. And so what do we need to offer them? And that's projects that will get people working. So what we want to have is a list ready to go so that any politician can come to us and say, we are looking at supporting X and we are happy to contribute Y dollars to achieve this. And we want to be able to say when it can start, how many people we'll be able to put back in jobs, exactly how much the project is, the detailed design is done, and it's been through community consultation and exactly how positive it was. The problem is that sometimes grant applications can be open for a couple of months and we do have warning, but if there's significant consultation, we still struggle on the timeframes. Sometimes they can be open for days, and we saw with Working for Victoria, for example, that municipalities got the big cash, including our neighbouring municipality of Moreland, were the councils that had their applications in early and were thorough and they were ready to go. And we need to be ready when these opportunities arise. So basically when a grant application opens up, we go into our drawer, we pull out our manila folder, we lay it on the table and we say, here you go. Obviously, maybe that's a bit old school, it might just be the soft folder on the desktop, but whatever it would be. And, you know, we should be able to say to the state government, for instance, you want to increase 3-year-old kinder placements. Well, guess what? We have this kindergarten infrastructure project ready to go. Here's one we prepared earlier on Your Passion is Waterways. Here are our plans for the Maribyrnong River precinct, for example, or creative arts. Oh, well, we've got an incinerator gallery. Do you know we're planning on doing an upgrade? And I probably can't go any further without saying Highball, indoor netball basketball stadium. Here's the site identification, all the consultation we've been through over the past the working drawing, so give us some money and you know what, we'll start for you as soon as possible, and we can say it with a big smile on our face. The projects don't need to be $1 million, they could be toilets, but obviously there's been grant opportunities for pocket parks and dog parks and things like that as well. We do need to be mindful that we need to take the community on the journey with us, and be open that whilst we might be going through consultation for these big projects, we're not necessarily changing the position of the projects in the long-term capital works plan, but we are ensuring that we have the opportunities if they arise. We do have the underlying strategy of MV 2040, which is so well regarded in the public sector, and that we can use to underpin many of these applications, but we do need to take it that step further. So I think we need to make Moonee Valley the partner of choice, we need to get prepared, and we need to make it easy for our state and federal representatives to advocate for us. So I'm asking for this notice of motion to be approved to get the report back, and I'm hoping that it will significantly get the wheels in motion.
Thank you, Councillor
Mr
Byrne.
Mayor, point of clarification.
Yes, Councillor
I totally support this notice of motion, but I was just wondering, if you recall earlier this year, we actually had to apply for shovel-ready projects already. So we do have shovel-ready projects already right now. So are you suggesting we scrap those and just get a new report done, or expand on the list that we've got right now?
Councillor Byrne.
I'm saying that our list isn't very extensive and they were basically just picked out of nowhere, and it would be good to actually have a proper report come back through the council chamber. We haven't had a shovel-ready project list come back in, and I think that it's something that needs to be open to the community for everyone to see.
Yeah, so the list that we've got now will be included in other projects as well, is that what you're saying?
Potentially, depending, I'm asking for a report back, so there would be some things on the list, but obviously I don't even know whether that list is confidential and whether we could be talking about it.
I think from
do we get clarification from the officer whether we have a list or not?
So, point of clarification through the CEO, does Moonee Valley Council have an active list of shovel-ready projects at present?
I believe there's a further work to identify how shovel-ready we are, and also I take the intention of this report probably is to identify the gap required. There may be some investment required to build the feasibility and planning pipeline, so we have more shovel-ready projects. That's my understanding of the intention, Councillor Byrne.
Once again, point of clarification,
Yes.
the question was, do we have a list right now? Yes or no?
So, through the CEO.
I have not seen a comprehensive list myself, but that's not to say they don't exist, because they just simply have not come across yet.
Thank you. Thank you. I think hopefully that answers the point of clarifications. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak as the seconder of this motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I am pleased to speak in support of this notice of motion from Councillor Byrne. During the recent election campaign, I heard from many residents of Buckley Ward about how much they are really looking forward to Council delivering on planned major projects and how much these projects will do to support our growing community. Two of our existing planned projects, which were raised with me regularly, were the revitalisation of Windy Hill and the proposed Highball Stadium. Residents also raised the need for BMX facilities, an emerging issue which became increasingly important to many local residents and particularly young people during COVID-19, and which I've spoken to earlier as part of my own notice of motion. Being able to partner with other levels of government to seek funding in order to deliver on projects such as these is vital to Council. This is why Council established an advocacy strategy, which we will review in the new year to establish new priorities under the new Council. In response to COVID-19, both the state and federal governments have made funding programs available to assist local governments to deliver projects and in doing so support job creation. In order to be eligible for many of the grant opportunities that are available, Council needs projects which are shovel-ready, as Councillor Byrne has mentioned. Generating a list of shovel-ready projects means that we will be able to better seek external support to deliver projects big projects like Windy Hill and the Highball Stadium for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Bedio.
I concur with my colleagues, Councillor Byrne and Councillor Adams. I believe this is a great initiative so that we can get on the front foot. I do also want to, as a reminder, with the budget implications of what I guess the cards we've been dealt with COVID, I implore our officers as part of this report to look at potential for public-private partnerships so that we can take on a bigger load of projects potentially and deliver more to our community. Obviously funding doesn't always go the full way with a lot of these projects, and there will be a gap that council has to carry, and in my opinion we probably don't look enough towards public-private partnerships within this council, and there are a lot of opportunities out there. So.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item 11.7 is Notice of Motion number 2020-29, adjustments to the concept design of the Flemington Community Hub and Debney's Park Precinct. I call on Councillor Rose Isa to present her Notice of Motion.
Thank you, Mayor. My motion reads that in response to community concerns about disability access, safety of children and maintaining open space, and without materially altering the timeline for delivery of new facilities in Flemington, that council officers consider and report as soon as possible on... Sorry, I feel like I'm cutting in and out. Yeah, sorry, apologies, I'm not sure.
I was going to use the other microphone next to you, maybe angle that one up if it... There's one just, there's one there that might have more luck with.
Oh, okay, all right. I might just begin again, I do apologise. That council officers consider and report on as soon as possible on 1, the incorporation of a range of proposed adjustments to the endorsed concept design of the Flemington Community Hub and Debney's Park Precinct into the detailed design if appropriate and able to be incorporated within the existing budget envelope and terms of the state funding agreement, specifically A, increasing the width of the path between the tennis courts and the building, B, relocating the cricket nets away from the open parkland to the north of the tennis courts or south of the building in a location that does not interfere with open play space, C, relocating the basketball courts to the existing concrete areas south of the existing community centre, D, relocating any or all elements of the commercial kitchen to the ground floor in combination with the kiosk to optimise accessibility, integration with outdoor seating and cafe areas in the foyer, and provide capacity for any future emergency relief and recovery where this does not impact on functionality of any other aspect of the hub. E, relocating the children's playground and activity room nearer to the main entrance and south of the building. F, increasing the distance between the playing field and the southern arm of the building to avoid the need for any fencing on the perimeter of the playing field. And G, the potential use of the site of the existing centre as a community market venue. And 2, where these adjustments can't be accommodated, the ways in which community concerns about accessibility, safety and loss of open parkland have been addressed. And 3, the placement of the temporary building in lieu of the existing centre to meet community needs and facilitate the construction of new facilities.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder for that motion?
Happy to second that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Sypek. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Thank you, Mayor, and apologise. My voice seems to be failing me as do like the microphone, so I apologise. And it follows on actually quite well from Councillor Byrne's previous motion about having projects shovel ready. Because what I guess is motivating me to move this motion, which again is seeking a report and feedback from council officers about how some adjustments may or may not be able to be incorporated in the design. What has, I guess, the history of the design was that a grant became available at very short notice to council, up to $10 million, and council didn't have a lot of turnaround time to put in plans that had to be quite detailed, had to give some schematic design and had to give some detail around the expenditure of a large sum of money. And so in doing so, council put in what it had ready, which hadn't unfortunately yet gone through the process of the consultation which had been planned. That process of consultation was still undertaken, and I participated in a number of aspects of that consultation, and I thank very much Melanie and her team from the community centre who very patiently answered my questions and other people's questions, but I guess were quite constrained because they were still waiting for the outcome of the grant, and were somewhat constrained by the project having been put into the process prior to the consultation taking place. What unfortunately also seemed to take place was that, and I'm not quite sure, I think this was possibly around the grant, the fact that the grant was for sporting items, which had the grant not been received, council may then probably have pushed out the delivery of those sporting items. I think that was possibly why some elements weren't actually included in the plans that then went out for consultation, and specifically the cricket nets and the basketball court. So while particularly the basketball court is something on which there has been a lot of favourable requests for basketball facilities, the location of the basketball courts weren't in fact included in the design that went out for consultation in July and August of this year. Likewise, the cricket nets that weren't included in the design that went out for consultation. And while they were put back in for the endorsed plans, that was the first time that community members had seen them. And look, I think all of this is the result of the council trying its best to fund a project, a very much needed project, but one that has been through a long history and with some degree of controversy, trying to get things moving forward and funded. The intention of this motion is to see if some of those outstanding concerns from the community might be able to be addressed with some of these adjustments are very small, others are larger, but nothing nothing's compelling officers to do anything in particular except to report back to us and to the community about some reasons as to why or why not these adjustments may be possible. So, for example, the cricket nets at the moment on the endorsed plans are located near a children's playground on an open part of the park and near of the friendship circle where older people sit. There are some potential spaces to the north of the tennis court where they could still have an almost north-south orientation as recommended, or certainly to the south of the building closer to the flats. There's a space there where they could definitely have a north-south orientation. Similarly, the basketball court is currently, I know no one can really see this, but the basketball court is currently, this was the application for the grant, so basketball court flagged to be here, but the application for the grant indicates that they're not to be fenced, so there's no fencing between the basketball court, the outdoor basketball area and Mount Alexander Road, and anyone in the area knows just how busy that is, and the thought of having young children chasing, and do you mind if I have a brief extension?
Extension, Councillor Osler.
The thought of having children chasing errant balls onto the road, if there's something that we can do about that, there is the existing concrete area to the south. If it's possible to consider the relocation there, it may well not be, and again, the intention of the report is to just seek some further information from officers in response to those issues around safety of children. Also accessibility. Accessibility was one of the report of the 8th of September noted that accessibility throughout the building was a recurrent discussion point among a variety of groups, and so just seeing whether any of the facilities from the kitchen could be put on the ground floor in conjunction with the kiosk to provide perhaps a space that can then serve outdoor, indoor and the cafe of the foyer in a slightly different way. It may not be possible within the timeline or the budget, but I know that from the feedback I've sought from residents over the last few weeks, I know that they are grateful for these questions being put, and I know that many of the women are very grateful for the possibility of the kitchen being considered on the ground floor. If it's not possible, we all understand, but I do hope my council colleagues might be able to support the motion to put these questions to the designers and see what can come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Sypek, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. And look, I support this notice of motion, and the reason why, now correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Isa, but we're not changing any structural stuff outside. It's all just internal. Is that correct? So this is going to be the second biggest investment Moonee Valley has ever invested into. Now, how many times have you heard friends who have built a house or built, something, and they're gone, gee, wish I'd have thought of that beforehand. Oh, I should have changed that. Let's take a breath here. Second biggest investment in Moonee Valley. There's no harm in asking a couple of questions like this. And these questions actually come from the community. They're not coming from Councillor Isa or Councillor Sypek or Councillor Byrne. They're coming from the community. So I think it's very, very appropriate that we actually do put it to the designers to see whether there is, a thought pattern here that, actually it probably works better like this. I just don't want to rush this as well. I totally agree with you. And look, if this is delayed by 1 or 2 weeks, I don't think it's going to hurt anyone. So I would be very, very happy if those questions were answered by the designers. And the designers might come back and say, listen, the reason why we can't do this is because of this, and this. Fine, I'm happy with that as well. But the question needs to be put. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I just off Councillor Sypek's comments, can I just ask a point of clarification to the relevant officer? Just if work will continue in the background whilst this report, the work on the hub and where we're at in the process will continue in the background whilst this report, between now and when the report comes, when we get notified. Does that make sense?
It's a point of clarification through the CEO. Does the moving of this motion in any way stall the current process that is underway?
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Susan Mayor, yes, my understanding of the intention of this motion is without material altering the timeline for delivery, or obviously, including financial implications. So certainly, my understanding will continue the work and address the issue where we can report back.
So work will continue,
Correct.
so it won't be halted. Okay,
Correct.
Thank you.
Did you want to speak to the motion, Councillor Byrne?
Look, just really briefly, I'm happy to support your notice of motion, Councillor Isa. The Flemington Hub is, a massive project for council, and we do want to get it right. And I think that we are definitely on the right track. There's some things from A to G, there's some that I agree with more, some less, but that's okay. Happy, as you said, it's for a report, and it'll be interesting to see what that says. I am mindful that we don't want to, I'm probably a little bit more concerned about the timelines than Councillor Sypek is. Obviously we don't want to get it wrong, but as I've mentioned before in a previous notice of motion, we do have timelines. We were successful in a shovel-ready project for these sporting facilities, and we were given $5 million from the state government. Now, if there are more grant opportunities, and at our first big grant we've received in a long time, we stuff it up, it's a massive reputational risk for us. So I'm very mindful that we do have timeline pressures. That's not to say that things can't change. We saw today in the state government they've canned a few trams, which is costing a few $1 million. So, projects change, but I don't think that any of these things would be big enough that we would want to risk losing a $5 million grant, would be my opinion on this. And we did apply for the grant. We endorsed submitting for that grant, and we now have to work with what we've got. But hopefully there might be some of these things that are really easy fixes, and if there have been community concerns and they're easy fixes, then so be it, and we'll just wait for the report to come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. And look, a lot of what I wanted to say has been covered in Councillor Isa speaking to her motion and Councillor Sypeck and Councillor Byrne's comments. But as a fellow ward councillor from Murnong, I just wanted to say that the Flemington Hub, I think, as we've all said, is a huge and really critical project for this community. It's been a really long journey to get to this point, and I think we're just months away from breaking ground on what's going to be a really game-changing development for the people of Flemington. Councillor Isa's motion, she's assured us, is not going to have any impact on the delivery of that project, but Councillor Isa's raised with us that members of the community have questions about some aspects of the project, and the motion raises those questions, I think, without any risk to getting the vital community facility built. There's been a lot of community feedback already on the project, and I think we all can see how important this multi-purpose building is going to be for the people in Flemington. The pandemic has also shown us how important the facility is, in particular for those residents of the Flemington public housing towers down there, and the fact that the current community centre's not been able to reopen due to the building not being safe is just a bit more evidence of how overdue this project is. We've got to get it built, we've got to do it right, and we've got to do it on time and on budget.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 11.8 is notice of motion number 2020-30, traffic measures in Kent Street, Flemington. I call on Councillor Rose Isa to present her notice of motion.
If you can just bear with me, Mayor, I just need to...
Give it, that's fine.
Sorry. Apologies. Mayor, I'd like to move that the CEO reports on the effectiveness of the traffic measures installed in Kent Street, Ascot Vale, in slowing traffic and facilitating safe pedestrian crossings, specifically A, whether the placement of the speed humps sufficiently slows cars approaching the pedestrian crossings, B, whether additional measures are required closer to the pedestrian crossings, particularly the crossings close to Tunbridge Street and Oriana Court, such as raising the pavement of the crossings, textured surfaces on the road, or further speed humps including close to Mount Alexander Road and between East Street and Burton Crescent, and C, whether truck movements can be further restricted along Kent Street.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Thank you, Mayor. The Kent Street traffic measures also have a long history, going back, I think, some 8 years, with a lot of community consultation around that, and previous ward councillors would be aware of that. I think that in the process, some of the design elements were changed along the way, particularly the removal of some slow points. And I don't think necessarily that could be avoided because there is a bike route and there are heavy vehicles that go down Kent Street. But I think there was some disappointment from residents that the slow points were removed because it has meant that the pedestrian crossings are now somewhat exposed. The speed humps are at certain locations and the pedestrian crossings are at other locations, and in particular if you travel over the bridge over the train line and you're going downhill and it's 40k but you're going downhill and then suddenly there's a pedestrian crossing. and the design has made pedestrians feel somewhat vulnerable. And I received an email recently from some residents who say they were lucky not to be bowled over by a car travelling from Ascot Vale Road while they were crossing. Gave them quite a fright. They wrote a very long email detailing other instances that they had witnessed, people being quite fearful of using the pedestrian crossings, which flies in the face of their purpose. So I'd be grateful for this report to assess the measures that have been installed and I guess see whether some way of slowing cars close to those pedestrian crossings might be able to be considered.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to this motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly to say I've also had several residents raise concerns with me about the safety of Kent Street to pedestrians as a major thoroughfare for many cars and trucks. So I welcome Councillor Isa's question to the CEO about the effectiveness of the measures taken to date and whether and how they can address the concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Bedio.
Very familiar with Kent Street, living on Ascot Vale Road. It was a disappointment that I couldn't go down Kent Street to turn into Pinocchio ticket to Luxor King when they built that little median strip. Understand the reasons why they did it. My concern, I fully agree with the motion put forward by Councillor Isa. My concern with Kent Street as we grow as a municipality and Mount Alexander Road continues to become, I guess, burdened with traffic, and same with Racecourse Road. The reliance on Kent Street as an interconnecting road and with rat running is going to grow. And so obviously while we can try our best to slow those cars down, the reality is without other options, it will continue to be used more and more often. So it'd be interesting to see whether this report could address the future of Kent Street as potentially becoming one of our major thoroughfares within the municipality.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 11.9 is Notice of Motion 2020-31, installation of solar panels on council-owned buildings. I call on Councillor Rose Isa to present her notice of motion.
Almost done, Mayor. I will just read this one. I'd like to move that the CEO prepares a report to council that lists all council-owned buildings, including sports pavilions, community centres and other council buildings, and whether the building A has solar panels installed on the rooftop, B is suitable for the installation of future solar panels, or C is unsuitable for the installation of solar panels for reasons provided in the report, and D whether council officers would recommend the installation of solar panels on the specific building as a means of reducing greenhouse emissions.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sypek. Sorry, Councillor Tyson. The Councillor Sypek's hand just went up slightly before yours. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
We had earlier this evening the wonderful efforts being made to reduce councils' corporate emissions through the PPA. And of course we have emissions from community, including from our community buildings, our council-owned community buildings. And they seem to be another area in the municipality that council can take a direct approach and quite a hands-on approach to helping clubs or to looking at grant opportunities that might be available to installing solar panels where appropriate on particular roofs. I know some buildings it's actually a matter of orientation, or it might be a matter of the roof structure itself that might be an impediment, but in some cases it just might be that the club that uses the building might not have the means of installing solar panels. If we can have a report that indicates where we might be able to put some panels, we can perhaps then look at ways we could seek funding to assist clubs to do that. Of course, once panels are there, they can help drive down electricity costs, which it is the economic and environmental outcome. having recently installed another 10 panels at home and very much anxiously looking to see whether I can get self-sufficient and not pay any electricity bills, I'm hoping that we might be able to do that for clubs and organisations as well across the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to the
Yes,
motion?
thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to probably inform Councillor Isa, that 3 years ago we received a federal funding for solar panels, and a couple of our clubs got it. We actually installed solar panels on the clock tower right now, and the new East Kill Leisure Centre is going to be fully solar panelled as well. But I'm fully support the solar panelling, and hopefully that other clubs get on board as well, and not only the clubs, but our buildings, our infrastructure. And I hope we can actually also even use local installers rather than, so supporting local businesses as well would be also a big bonus for Moonee Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 11.10 is Notice of Motion 2020-32, Strategic Planning for Racecourse Road and Union Road Precincts. I call on Councillor Rose Isa to present her Notice of Motion.
Last one. I move that the CEO prepares a report on options and recommendations for completing the strategic planning for the Racecourse Road and Union Road commercial precincts, with particular attention to protecting the sensitive heritage and residential interfaces, enforcing height limits and built form controls, and the appropriate classification of the precincts.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to your motion?
So many years ago there was a structure plan for Racecourse Road and Union Road. The processes were commenced. It was nominated as an activity centre, as was Union Road, under Plan Melbourne. Much consultation took place, and the structure plan was abandoned in 2015. My understanding is that it was abandoned because there was some concern about resolving those interface issues, and some sense that it was just very difficult to work out what to put forward that might meet the needs of all stakeholders. What's happened since then, though, is that we've had many major development applications along Racecourse Road, including in the up to 1 Ascot Vale Road and 11 to 15 Ascot Vale Road, which was previously on the fringe of the activity centre area. And I've been at VCAT in attendance, supporting residents for those applications, and not to be able to put to the VCAT member what Moonee Valley's strategic planning is for the activity precinct is actually somewhat of an embarrassment. And there's been 3 major applications I've been part of, and it's taken some time to work out what is going to be applied in the vacuum of strategic planning. It leaves developers with uncertainty, it leaves residents with uncertainty, and I know there are difficult questions that have to be resolved, but I'd just like to, I guess, kickstart the process to see what information officers might be able to provide around how we might be able to have some strategic planning for the precinct, so that we can present at VCAT with a firmer vision for the area.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to this motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think the only thing I'd like to add is that I think during the campaign period, a lot of residents reached out and spoke to the candidates about development in our municipality, and I think the strongest way that we can ensure that appropriate development occurs is through strong strategic planning. So it would be great to hear a report on that matter.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Bedio.
Mayor, I would like to propose an amendment. I move an amendment to add additional words to Councillor Isa's motion, following the words precincts, adding and how the precincts will continue to create a commercial opportunity in line with MV 2040 and community expectations.
Might just get you to read that again slower, just so governance can put that up on the... Oh, okay. That's the motion. All right, so... Wow.
Did you write that already?
Councillor Bedio, again, I'll just get you to read that motion again. So moving a formal amendment.
I move an amendment to add the additional words to Councillor Iser's motion following the word precincts, that being the last precincts of the motion, and how the precincts will continue to create a commercial opportunity in line with MV 2040 and community expectations.
All right, so do I have...
I'm happy to second that.
Seconder, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Bedio, do you want to speak just to the formal amendment, so just to your addition here, not the entire motion?
Yep. Whilst I don't intend on diluting the importance of paying particular attention to the sensitive heritage and residential interfaces, I think it's important that as a holistic strategy for the precincts, that the wording and of the directive that we give to our officers include and address the core element of these precincts, and that is the commercial aspects. So our retailers, our restaurants, our shops, and that way we can create, and with that information and feedback from the officers, it will allow us to create a more sophisticated and holistic plan for those precincts.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Sypek, do you want to speak to the amendment on hand?
What Councillor Bedio says actually makes sense. I like the amendment, and I was happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this amendment? Councillor Iser, yes?
Happy to have the extra words in there. It's interesting that it's seen as a bit of a tension already, that there's a tension between commercial and residential, and we know that there is. We hear the issues that surround that, but that's the very point of having a strategic plan, is to try to work out how we do manage that very interface. And if we can get it right for Union Road and Racecourse Road, then we're making it a lot easier for communities in the future. So I really look forward to seeing, to embarking on the complex task and working through the difficulties.
Thank you, Councillor Iser. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the amendment? If not, I'll put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously. So that now becomes a substantive motion. Councillor Bedio, you hadn't spoken yet, you were just starting to speak. Do you wish to continue speaking to the substantive motion?
And that being the motion with the amendment?
Correct.
I concur with Councillor Iser that in any elements of planning, we've seen it very much with MPAC. The tensions between the residential use and the commercial use. The reasons, and I think now having that wording included in the motion allows us to get a more balanced picture in that with these precincts will undoubtedly, it will come before us over the next few years, tensions between proposed commercial use, proposed residential use, and having a more comprehensive strategic plan, and having a plan, having just without going off just the planning scheme, having plans for these precincts will allow us to make better decisions over the next term. So,
thank you, Councillor Bedio. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't a councillor in 2015, so I don't know the whole history in terms of why it was abandoned. But obviously, in the last council term, we did work towards setting up neighbourhood plans, and we are kicking off our neighbourhood plans with Airport West and Keilor East, hopefully going out for some community consultations soon. So I would imagine that I'm happy to support this, and the report coming back, and I think it will say, Ascot Vale probably needs the neighbourhood plan going forward, which I think is a good thing. But what I am glad to hear is that around the table, whilst we're talking that it's going to be really complex and that really sensitive commercial and residential interface, it's going to be hard work, and there are going to be people who are going to be I've got to think of a correct word. I don't have one. But
Happy
obviously there's
Jan.
going to be a bit of artists. What was that, Councillor?
Not happy, Jan.
Not happy, Jan. It's going to, there's going to be some really interesting conversations with the community and amongst councillors and in this chamber, and there's going to be times where it's not pretty. But I feel we're elected in to make hard decisions, and there will be really hard decisions that come out of some of these interfaces. So I hope that people remember what we're committed to doing, and that is eventually getting this strategic plan done and the neighbourhood plan done, because it is extremely important for the sensitive heritage, for the businesses and for everything else. So hopefully the report comes back and we can see when we're doing a neighbourhood plan for these areas. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. That concludes our notice of motions. Well done, councillors. We now move to the next item of business, being item 12, urgent business. Councillors, do we have any items of urgent business? Councillor Bedio.
I move that Council admit an item of urgent business to rectify an error in the appointment of councillor members to the Royal Agricultural Society of Victoria Consultative Committee from the 24th of November 2020 meeting. Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Is there a seconder? Councillor Byrne. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak to the motion to establish how this item meets the definition of urgent business under Council's governance rules? Yes, Mayor. I believe this is within the definition of urgent business. This is the last meeting of the calendar year and we will not be meeting until early 2021. This item cannot be conveniently scheduled for the first 2021 meeting, as this is too long a person to leave this unresolved. As this is a new council, it's vitally important that we assign representatives to all important committees and external bodies before we break for a lengthy holiday period. This is too long a period to leave this unresolved. As this is a new council, yeah. I think that might have been an autocorrect there. Councillor Byrne, do you wish to speak to this motion?
Just that the other clause for it to be considered as urgent business, that it couldn't have been seen before the briefing to be noted as a notice of motion. But my understanding behind this is that there was thoughts that it could have potentially been moved through the minutes or through another reason to change this, whereas post that opportunity it then became evident as to that couldn't be done and that it would have to come through now as urgent business. So that's how it meets both those clauses.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak to this item, being the acceptance of this as an item of urgent business? Councillor Isa.
As the person responsible for the mistake, I'd like my mistakes fixed as quickly as possible, please.
If that's a reason for urgent business, but that's all right. Any other councillor wish to speak to accepting this item of urgent business? Otherwise, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. So now I'll ask the mover of the item of urgent business to move their substantive motion. Councillor Bedio. I move that the Council update the Council delegates for the 2020 to 2021 to reflect the following councillor appointments to the Royal Agricultural Society of Victoria Consultative Committee, being Councillor Katrina Hodgson and Councillor Jacob Bettio. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Bettio, do you wish to speak to this motion? No. No. Councillor Tyson?
No.
Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. The next item of business is item 13, confidential reports, and there are 3 confidential items this evening. Councillors, can I have a motion that the meeting be closed to members of the public in accordance with section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to allow for consideration of confidential information? Item 13.1 is confidential under section 3(1)(g), being private commercial information, being information provided by a business, commercial or financial undertaking that relates to trade secrets and, if released, would unreasonably expose the business, commercial or financial undertaking to disadvantage. The reports contain tender information provided in confidence. Items 13.2 and 13.3 are confidential under section 3.1a, being council business information, being information that would prejudice the council's position in commercial negotiations if prematurely released. The reports relate to property purchase information, which is commercially sensitive and therefore confidential. Can I have a motion to, yes, Councillor Sharp, seconded Councillor Adams. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. So this is where we say goodnight to those watching tonight's council meeting via live stream. As this is the final ordinary meeting of council for the year, on behalf of all councillors and council staff, I would like to wish all of our city a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and we look forward to seeing you in 2021. Good night.